Hi, and welcome to Conversations About Money. I'm back today with Holly Woods. We already had a conversation that was about money and purpose, and this is going to be a continuation of the theme of money and purpose. And what we want to talk about today, or our starting point, is what I'm going to call the currency of trust. I find that a lot of people talk about trust around me. They talk about trust being very important in business today. And trust does seem to have a kind of currency with it. I even see this at the large scale businesses where people like big agencies are writing about, they write about important topics, so to speak, and they talk about trust as well, that businesses that can't build trust in their environment will not be successful in the future. So I think it's a very interesting thing to explore, because I think it's different from what we imagine when we hear the word. So I'd like to welcome you back, Holly Woods, to continue this dialogue of really moving into this very unknown future that we're facing, especially as business owners who deeply care about purpose and must therefore care about money, because it's very difficult, or I would say impossible, to fulfill your purpose at a business level without engaging very deeply with money. So yes, the currency of trust. It's funny, people talk to me all the time. They say, "Oh, Sarah, how do I trust more?" And I always think that that's a really funny question, because it doesn't feel to me like very much a how-to question. Trust seems to me to be something that you build through experience, usually of being in really difficult situations where you don't trust and you feel really afraid. I feel like people want to build trust without being afraid. And my trust has come through being in really hairy situations and having to learn how to navigate them.
You know, it's as you're talking, because as you know, I don't have some profound opinion about all of this other than my own experience, like you do in working with clients and in my own life. But what occurred for me as you're speaking is that a lack of trust, in some ways, perhaps to a large part, is a lack of inherent trust in self. And so when we are not fully aware and awake to who we are and can live in an authentic way, aligned with ourselves, with what matters to us, with what we are seeking in the world, it's harder to have trust in others, in another vendor, another partner, another organization, because we don't know specifically what we're looking for. And when we have a deeper clarity about, what it is that we're seeking as a part of a purpose-driven life, we're more discerning and can go seeking that thing with tighter parameters, perhaps. And I would know, does that person resonate with me? Do their values speak to me? Are they working in integrity, aligned with me? And it seems to me that the more lost a person is, the more the confused or living in a very unspecified way, it's much harder to go out and seek that which would be trustworthy to me. I don't know, does that make sense to you?
That absolutely makes sense to me, because I think that if you don't, in fact, I know that if you don't have that trust in yourself, and for me, it's actually, my perspective is it's more like a trust in life, in the fundamental underpinnings of life itself. It's that life is fundamentally, it's not some harsh, punishing reality. It's not, for me, some school. A lot of people see life as a school where you have to learn these lessons. I don't see it that way. So trust touches into our deep understanding of what life is. If I see life as being kind of like on my side, not favoring me over anyone else, but on everybody's side. It's like life is actually fundamentally a beautiful experience. It's a generous experience. And yes, very tough things can happen, but as you look at them from a bigger perspective, you always see that behind that, there's this beauty, there's this generosity and creativity that's going on, even through those experiences. And that helped me to develop a certain kind of trust. So when it feels like everything's falling apart, I've had experiences that tell me it looks like it's falling apart, but it's not. Or when I can think of times, especially as I've been learning about my own relationship with money, especially in the earlier days, where I would suddenly find myself just with not enough money to meet whatever my commitments were at that time. And you can feel like, help, everything is like, it's just a very hairy situation. And to get through those situations time and time again, builds your, it changes your sense of what life actually is. And I think that that is the way that I've built that trust in myself, which is a trust in the life that I am a part of, if you like.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I often say that if you were in a tug of war with the universe, you'd win, because I think it's all conspiring, to be in support of us living our most potentiated, fulfilling, amplified lives. I mean, life force wants to move through us. So there is, when you realize that, there is this inherent trust that it all will be well. And I guess I also see that it is a both and, that in general, the writ large universe is on my side, and it will all work out as it's intended, or as it should be, or as it's meant to, however you see that destiny or not. And that the more, I guess I see that the more specific your awareness of where you are living, the more easily you can navigate. It's like you have a GPS to navigate the complexity, the chaos, the everything that shows up. And I can sit here being balanced and calm and still in the midst of all of that, when I have that deep internal awareness. And so it's much harder to rock my boat as the world is swirling around me. Even if I do know it's all going to turn out just fine.
And the other thing that goes with that is that if you know who you are, as much as we ever know, like, do we really, it's a very easy phrase to say. I think that's something that also grows over time, is a sense of who I am really. But as that grows, and then I'm able to know what I want, because that's my choice, that's my wish, that comes from somewhere within me. Like, I want to have this experience, I want to create this thing on the planet. This means something to me, and doesn't really matter if it means something to somebody else. I get to choose what means something to me. But then I am not depending on somebody else to provide some signals to me that everything's okay. I don't think you could ever rely on another person to provide that signal, because they might not even just be feeling okay today. And then they can't provide that signal to you. And so that's what enables us to stop looking for other people. Or, for example, this meeting has to go well so that I can trust what I'm doing and trust myself and feel like I'm a good person and I'm on track. It's like, if the meeting doesn't go well, the meeting didn't go well. If this person isn't interested in my product, even if they were the one that I had picked to be the winner, because I see this happening over and over again. And we've made this mistake several times in the last year, where we say, that's the one, this is the one that's going to be the answer. And then it isn't. But how you navigate those situations, because that can be so devastating if you don't have this currency. I'm really intrigued by this use of the word currency with trust. If you don't have that currency with you, because you can lose, I think, months worth of energy over a failed opportunity.
So what also occurs to me is that as you gain this greater self-awareness, who you are and what is your work in the world, what is it you are attempting to deliver, contribute, trust that the things that you need will show up. It's having that belief. Trust has some components. One is a belief in self, a belief in opportunity, a belief in the things that I can't even anticipate will show up. So it actually implies the synchronicity, sort of the non-local effects of what we know as reality these days in the quantum field. It assumes that I have trust that I'm here, things that I need are here, and things that I don't even know I need are here are going to be here. And so it projects, trust is projected into the future if you're really living in that trust. And so it does several, it calms our nervous system. It allows us to create, futuristic oriented plans. It actually sparks like possibility. I don't know, the words are not coming well, but I'm sensing that trust is the inherent currency of magic. It's almost like this is what causes magic to happen, the synchronicities that occur.
And it's also the currency of when the magic's not happening. Because one of the things that I think is the hardest to navigate is when you know that magic can happen and it doesn't appear to be happening. And now it may be happening and you're not seeing it. I've definitely seen that everything was actually fine and I was just not experiencing it. But when I'm not experiencing it, that's very real to me. And it will be very real to people listening, that life is not all, it doesn't feel like it's all synchronicities and things. Like I've experienced a lot of those, and I've experienced a lot of not that as well. And I feel that there's an interesting thing there with trust, because it holds through both of those experiences.
Don't you think though that it's just a matter, I mean, at least for me, this is what I've learned, is that it's a matter of timing. I'm not inherently a patient person. And so as I've learned to create synchronicity, or I'm going to start calling it magic because it doesn't resonate with so many people, but the science, we know about synchronicities. It's real. It's been studied. It's in existence. And when I'm taking action and it's all in alignment and I'm wanting the synchronicity to show up now, and where's the people, where's the resources, the things that you would expect, and it's not happening, like, where is it? And you start to give up. I'm like, oh yeah, I actually have to be patient because it's going to show up in its own timing. And as I've become to trust that, I trust that it's not on my timeline and it's going to show up differently than I might expect it. And it's always going to be better than I could imagine, because, who am I relative to the field? That it always happens. I don't ever expect that it doesn't happen as it's supposed to. I mean, I don't ever experience now that it happens differently than it's supposed to. I almost, like, I can't remember the last time where everything was in alignment and I was taking action, moving forward and having trust that something didn't happen that was as good or better than what I had hoped for, when I live in that trust.
Yes. Yeah.
With patience, not in my timing. I guess that's the caveat, is it's not in my timing. I can't expect when or where or how.
Yeah, to me, I think this is one of the most interesting areas of all. I see people who say things like, the universe doesn't want me to do this, or that doesn't want this to happen at the moment. And often I feel that externalizes the situation. It makes it like, this is not a very pleasant experience I have. Obviously, the universe, life, God, whatever, doesn't want me to want what I want. And I think that that's a very disempowering statement. And I don't actually really buy that. I think some very challenging things happen. And to me, this is one of the most interesting things is when I feel like I'm being pushed to be patient in that way that you described. But actually, it feels really important for me that this happens now. And I think that there are times, and this is where I've really expanded my capacity, where I've said, no, I will not be patient. This has to happen now. And there's a way that I can do that, which just makes me more and more impatient, and there's, which doesn't work very well and makes things slower and slower and slower. And there's a way where I guess I'm so aligned with life. In my language, that's how I feel it. I'm so aligned in that moment that what I say, it almost feels like it becomes a command, and then everything changes. And I feel that this is an important part of that whole dynamic, as well as the universe timing. It's a both and. There is natural timing for things, and we are part of that. And if we have a sense of urgency around something, that may well be part of the natural timing. So how do we respond to it in such a way that we don't get what feel like more and more lessons in patience?
Right.
And how do we discern this is a time to be patient and let everything happen naturally? I see a lot of people say, oh, I need all these people to work for me now. And frankly, they don't. I was in a conversation last week. Somebody said, okay, now we need to build a team. We need bums on seats. And I really wanted to say, well, what are they going to do? Because there is literally nothing for them to do at the moment. So it's like there's a lot of discernment needed, I think, around all of these areas. And that's one of the skills that I feel is most important for us to learn to look at. What do I actually need now to create this outcome that I'm creating versus what does everybody tell me I might need, or what does my old experience tell me this is the next thing to do? It requires an incredible amount of presence and discernment and observation and reflection. That's what I find.
Yeah, I love that you just shared that, Sarah, because I honestly had not thought about what you just described as, the ability to see when patience is useful and or required, and when we can demand your word, the thing that needs to happen now. And honestly, I hadn't actually even taken in my own life that I've begun really, and this is very recent for me, begun doing that. And things this year, I'm noticing like happening just crazy fast. And I don't know, is that some new capacity I have, or is it?
It's also the energy of this year.
Yeah, and the universe kicking in and saying, all right, we got to do it now. Like, don't wait. I don't know which it is, but I'm experiencing, for the most part, like things are happening pretty fast, and I'm being patient. It's a both and. I'm also being patient about some things. So it's a really interesting distinction.
Yes, I think it's really significant. I think of the kinds of situations, I can think of stories that I've heard and related stories I've experienced, which are usually around health, where the doctors are telling you that your child or your whatever, that we've all heard these stories, is going to die. And the mother is sitting there, and they could take the patient route, and that's probably not going to work. And then the child or the person in the situation is going to follow the trajectory. But there are stories where there's this sense that that person has like, no, this is not the right time. I will not accept what I've been told. And they simply go completely against all the signals that they're being given, all the signals that they can read for themselves in front of them really clearly. It's like I read a story just the other day, and she said the lungs were shutting down, the kidneys were shutting down, the whole thing was shutting down. And she went into this like, no, I do not accept. It's like almost everything we're not taught. We're told you must accept, you must surrender. It is a kind of deep acceptance, but it's a deep acceptance of something completely different, which is which is also our own power as part of that universe,
Right.
to change everything that's happening in it. And when we apply that to business, in business, we don't usually feel that we're in a life-threatening situation. And if a business is falling apart, many people will tend to just feel like the business is falling apart, and they'll go into massive different kinds of actions to deal with that. But you see it most clearly when it's life-threatening. That's where the most dramatic stories happen, but that's where we learn the principles.
It's fascinating. I had one of those experiences about a decade ago where I had about 12 autoimmune disorders, and the internist told me I was going to have to live with them all and sent me to a pain clinic in Denver. And I just said, no, that's not what I'm doing. I'd rather not be here, but I'm going to be here and I'm going to figure this out. So I did. And what occurs for me from, a lot has happened since that experience, but what I also know is that the commitment that's required, you have to have trust to create the commitment. Like, I know I can get through this. It's not supposed to be like this. It's supposed to be different. And when you have that distinct awareness of what's living in you and wants to come out in the world and make a difference, whatever your impact is, it creates that commitment that I'm willing to go the extra mile because I trust that it will be worthwhile. I trust that the outcome of my effort and my intention and my the use of energy in my life and in the world will be invaluable, and I have to do that. There's something about this internal sense of knowing, the word you used on our last conversation, this knowing that what I am here to do is so critical that I can't not do it. And therefore I have trust that I will find my way regardless of what's going on in the moment.
It's very interesting. I've been teaching recently about value and the value of me or you, and of being here. And of course, actually, when we think about it very, very little, we can immediately see that a person's value is, in a way, it's a crazy thing to ask about. Human beings are a part of nature. They're part of the sacredness of life. And the value is clearly infinite, or even that sounds like you're trying to put a number on it that you can't put a number on, if you see what I mean. But the value is intrinsic to me. I know that. And at the same time, I think most of us don't really live that. We don't know that very well. And so it's very easy for people to make themselves feel small, or to make themselves feel more important, like they have to boost their sense of self-importance to make up for the fact that they don't feel that deep intrinsic value inside. And it plays havoc with the way we value our work and therefore the decisions we make. So I think it's really important that you brought that up, because what I did in the teaching is I started asking people to put a financial value on the impact of their work. Mm-hmm. And then we started to look at the ripple effect. So you might say something that changes a person's life, and that will have an effect for the rest of their life, which could be worth a lot, just that. And then you look at all the ways they impact other people through that. And then all the ways they impact other people. And you come to the infinity and then, because you can't count anymore. But what was fascinating was it drove people crazy, because I was trying to make them put numbers on themselves. And the numbers started at like, well, I'm worth £22,000 a year, because she was caring for her parents, and that's how much a carer gets paid. Wow. And it just went bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger when she started to realize the real impact of who she is and what she does. And then it gets a bit crazy. But what I noticed by doing that is that people started to recognize that the value of their being alive and their being engaged in life, like fully engaged, fully alive, not only would massively increase their actual financial value in terms of what they get paid, that was really obvious, but it's more like they can really put themselves wholeheartedly into whatever it is that they are doing and contributing
Yes.
which will be a part of their sense of fulfilling their own purpose. And
Yes.
so this kind of very contrary exercise where I was pushing to do people to do something that I knew was impossible to do, but it's so extraordinary what an effect it has on you. I went through it a few years ago, and I did it in relation to a single client and the value of the work I'd done with a single private client. And the numbers got so crazy that it helped me to understand and to live into what I'm really doing. And look, I'm no more important or bigger or better than anybody else. I have a little more experience in this and a lot less experience in that. It really isn't about that at all, but it's about coming to that true sense of self and that my piece is part of the whole.
Yeah. And I mean, I often talk about purpose as each of us is a puzzle piece, you know, a unique, one of a kind, nuance. Nobody else lives the puzzle piece that you live. And I think that's what drove me, you know, a decade ago to say to the internist, no, I'm not doing the pain clinic route because I won't be living fully as myself in that moment. And I must figure this out in order to live this dynamic, potentiated life. And when we are inherently living our as life force running through us, we have so much more to contribute and offer the world, and can do it in such a discerning way that our trust it becomes an internal, it's it's kind of like coherence. When I'm internally coherent, and I'm much more able to find resonance and create external coherence, and therefore the trust factor goes up exponentially, I would imagine, because now there is really no distinction between me and what is happening in the world around me, because I am resonant with all that is occurring, and then life appears, magic. I'm going to use the word again, even though I said I wouldn't, and it just all falls into place, you know, in its time, more or less.
Yes, which includes a lot of experiences, often of it feeling like it's not falling into place, and then it falls into place, and then the next thing comes along. It's like, oh, yes, like my personal experience is, because I'm involved in some things that are really so way beyond my own capacity, that there's a continuous challenge. There's a fight between the me who thinks that I should still know how to do this or be able to do this or have some prior something, and of course there's a whole lot of experience I do have, and then the need to recognize that this hasn't been done before, which is always true. It's like, it's always true. It doesn't matter what business you're running or what activity you're in. Actually, where you are now has never been done before. But we have tended to think that pretty much if I do the same as I did last time, it's going to be okay. That doesn't feel like it's going to work anymore. What I see is, in where we are in our evolution, that doesn't work anymore. We have a lot of answers to things. We have a lot of solutions to things, but we're not doing those solutions because there's something that's going on inside our minds and within our consciousness. And for me, I think one of the keys to this stage of where we are is our ability to not have all the answers, or to know that maybe I have a lot of answers. I'm very experienced in some things, because of course the most successful business people have a huge amount of experience. And with all of that, I don't know exactly where we are. I don't know what's going to happen. So I have to show up not just with all of my experience, but with my aliveness, my awakeness, my curiosity, my really, I don't know. And that's where trust, faith, the inner knowing rather than the outer knowing start to have currency, because it's in those moments where we do that magic gets created. Now, that magic is always outcomes. It's tangible. It's the real stuff that happens here in the 3D world, however you describe it. It's money and results and actual things happening that change things. And that's where, to me, I begin to see the potency of this word currency. it's the currency that kicks in at an energetic level in that very open space of, with all my experience, I don't have the answers, and I'm willing to walk forward in curiosity and inquiry and reflection, and many of these other skills that I think we use much more today, and sourcing as well. And through that you create results, and then you see, because currency is that flow. It's like it creates the financial results. It's kind of like really connects very directly with this energy of money.
So I think the word that you used in there that I want to pick up on is sourcing. And what I know to turn trust into tangible results, I have to trust that my, extrasensory apparatus, whatever I'm building as a means of listening to the field, to source the information I need and the resources, and to align with and resonate with all of the opportunities that I believe are currently in existence. And it's just for me to find them and look, to be prepared for them as they show up. It's the trust that I can do that, I can be available, and that it will emerge. And so for my, alignment to trust in my alignment and that it will result in tangible effect, I have to also know that that the universe is conspiring to support me by bringing in the resources, and that requires me to have some capacities that I think we haven't had in the past and or didn't use them. We were depending on our human brains that live within our skulls, rather than the information that exists outside of these bodies, and calling upon and listening to all of the information that is available to us is part of why I can trust. So I seldom make a decision, even if it feels in alignment, without a clarity about this is a good, this is a decision that is going to be supported and resonant with where I'm going. So I don't know if that makes sense.
Yes. I mean, I realized that over these last years, there's a skill that I have developed. I can remember when I didn't have it, and now I can feel that I have it, and it's getting stronger. Whenever I'm in a conversation, especially a business conversation, and we're talking about where we're going, which we do a lot of because we're constantly kind of shaping the next steps and also the big picture, I am constantly using my subtle sensing ability to read what it is that we're talking about, and to instantly read anywhere where it doesn't feel good. Mm-hmm. And then to draw attention to that and ask questions until we find what makes that feel good. Because I know that what feels good now, as we project forward, creates good in the future. And I think what we used to do was say, okay, I'll do whatever now, and it doesn't really matter what it feels like, but if I work hard now, I will create a good future. And so many of us have found that we worked really hard, and what did we create? A really hard working future. We created exactly what we were living. Right. And so the ability to find that way to feel good, the only way that I can do that is using this subtle information, and then read like, that feels amazing. That feels really beautiful and fulfilling and whole. But this bit feels really uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. So what's going on there? And I notice that is the primary way now that I shape the future and the strategy of a business. And you can do that right out to, many years down the line. You can get the sensing of it, even if you can't see the details of the physical shape of it. You can get the sensing of it. And I know that informs the trajectory mm-hmm. of the business. That's a very fascinating skill. I developed that through the help of somebody else who really sorted out a lot of energetic stuff for me. It's a pretty incredible thing to be able to do.
And a lot of times I help clients start that process, gaining that sensory awareness by tuning into their bodies. Our body awareness is it feels like a first step, because our internal subtle milieu is that body intelligence is really powerful. And it's like the primary level of education. It's like we have to have those senses, and what you described as feeling good, I find that mostly that's in the body, and then it's the extrasensory perceptions that we are able to call in that inform. I think this is how it works. I don't think I've ever articulated. I think it informs our body, and so we have an amplified sensory experience, from the body outward. And you start wherever you are. If you don't have any of that yet, starting in your body is a great place to start. And then as you gain all that bodily awareness, you're going to begin to sense the subtle energies outside of you. And they are, infinite, as we it's like it's infinite. And you can feel into eternity, infinity and eternity. Like there's no end to what you can experience when you develop these capacities. But starting here in this apparatus we've been given, I too find, like, I don't make any decision, and it's like I don't know how I would make decisions anymore if I didn't have that
sensing into that.
Yeah,
well, and they're really interesting.
They're not reliable. They're just, those decisions aren't reliable in my awareness.
Yeah, that's a really interesting thing. I've had many experiences working with business owners where they talk about, I'm experiencing anxiety, or I'm really upset today or something, but actually what they're experiencing always is an energy in their body. Right. And some of those energies feel very strong, but if you'll have this experience all the time, if I ask them to describe it, they'll say, well, it feels like knives whirling around in my solar plexus. That's a very clear example I remember. And of course there aren't knives whirling around in somebody's solar plexus. Or someone can say, I feel like I've been punched in the guts. Of course they haven't been punched in the guts. So everyone is reading energy all the time, because those knives are absolutely not real, and yet they feel like real. And also the experiences we have of pleasure, like our scientists describe things like dopamine and serotonin, but that's actually such a limited way of looking at it. That may be something that's happening, but the experience of pleasure, for example, is an experience of a whole suite of frequencies or energy or vibrations, however you want to describe it, that are happening. And even if you don't speak this language, you're already pretty sophisticated in your ability to feel them. And then from there, you can learn how to grow that capacity. So yes, to come back to the simple feelings of what feels good. We know what feels good and what doesn't feel good. Sometimes when we're experiencing something new, we're not quite sure if it's good or bad. It's like, oh, this feels unfamiliar. And what I notice is, like, if I really feel it, it feels amazing. But if I think about it, I'm not sure, because it's just unfamiliar. But in fact, it always feels good. There's just some thoughts that contradict that.
Yeah, I noticed a couple of things with clients. Many of us have had a lot of trauma in life. And so we're not capable of trusting our body to give us an instinctual awareness of what's really right here, because, we're recovering from many things. And that PTSD experience will cause us to be hyper alert, even when what is right here is actually not of threat. And so, if one is not really sensory, doesn't have a sensory capacity, learning to resolve, and you've got some great content for doing that, Sarah. just saying, go get Sarah's work. But to resolve that trauma-induced hyper alertness in the body, to clear out the confusing and confounding signals that show up. And once you've done that, then there is a much more pure apparatus available to us to be desensitized to trauma and to show up with a more discerning, sensory nervous system. I find that, and the other thing is that so many people, especially in our Western culture, and people who've been in corporate environments, hierarchical organizations, and or repressed, context, families, just don't have an awareness of body or emotion, and don't want to have an awareness. It's too scary to imagine that I'm going to open myself up to having very real experiences in life, because it got me in trouble when I was a kid. I was told to, be quiet, or I was ridiculed or shamed or rejected or whatever, dismissed. That happens when some people, especially young boys, not allowed to be themselves. And so they've repressed all of those things, and they don't trust their ability to sense what's right here. And so they cognize everything. And I find that to really trust ourselves, to trust what's really emerging from us, and therefore trust the life, as you describe it, which I love, we really do have to gain an awareness of what is really occurring for me in this moment, which means I need to work through whatever that emotional trauma was that lets me show up as a more pure, more awake and aware human.
I think this is so interesting, because now we're beginning to build the stages of developing this currency of trust. Mm-hmm. And as you know, as we both know, in business, anybody at any level of business could be struggling with exactly the things you're talking about. You can be hugely successful and really detuned because of many experiences you've had, both as a child and probably ongoing as an adult. I don't think success is any indication of what we're talking about. But that currency that we can build of trust therefore goes through stages. And the first stage uses a word that many people might not want to hear, but I'm going to use it anyway because of that, which is healing. Mm-hmm. Like, you might believe in healing or not believe in healing, or think that that's a good thing, or it's like, oh my goodness, that's not my territory at all. Mm-hmm. I will also use the word relaxation, to be able to really relax into who you are, where you feel so deeply comfortable with yourself. And it's not some kind of woo-woo out there thing. It's more like the most ordinary feeling in the world that is not ordinary, because most of us, most of our lives, have never experienced it, frankly. Like, I didn't experience that. Maybe a few times when I was a child, I can remember that experience of just, lying on the grass in the garden and just completely relaxed myself. But for many people, those are the memories they hold of being themselves. And it feels like that's never been the case again. So to be able to relax into yourself, that's a simple level of healing. And then when you get triggered by things, like we all get triggered by stuff. Some people get big time triggered by stuff. Some people also suppress it because it's so uncomfortable. Actually dealing with that stuff helps to open up these new abilities, which I really believe this is not just the currency of trust, this is the currency of the future. It's really clear to me that these subtler abilities are on the cutting edge of our evolution. And if we ignore them, we will increasingly feel out of touch with reality. The younger generation will say, hey, dad, hey, mom, you don't understand, you don't get it. You're really out of touch. It brings that dinosaur feeling. Mm-hmm. If you develop those abilities, it's like developing new superpowers that give new ways of doing things that you might have been doing for years. You might have been making business decisions for years and years and years. To bring in this extra capacity of being able to use a whole lot more subtle information than perhaps you already use. And entrepreneurs are often very good at this already, at least to some extent. But when you have that mixed with trauma, it can create a very chaotic and rather unstable experience. So to build these capacities is literally like developing a superpower.
It is, and I just
that's something very, I think that's special.
I just want to acknowledge you and your work, and what an effect it had for me in my life, being a longtime survivor with PTSD residue forever. And
a highly, highly functioning person. Like, I think it's very important to make
very
this.
successful.
You were, yeah, really highly functioning. You were not a basket case, because it's very often when we hear these words, we think, oh, that person's going to be a basket case. And I really want to speak in this conversation to people at all levels of business, because this is a human
Yeah,
thing.
well, that was the gist of what I was going to share, is that relaxation was a word that you used somewhere in one of your teachings, probably the Thank You Money course. And what I recall, the nugget that dropped in for me in such a deep way was that if I relax, I can receive the fresh energy the universe wants to give me. And for some reason, that just like, oh my gosh, I never thought of that. Otherwise I'm carrying around all this toxic energy that, has been in my body, my soma, my energy structure for decades. And I can't get clean and pure and available to the universe. So the relaxation really spoke to me, because I had been efforting for decades. And so the second part of what I wanted to say is that I do work with a lot of pretty senior executives, and what they come to know is that even if they've been successful, even if they're 6-7 figure incomes, that life changes when they're able to receive information in a new way, where they can take back their life energy. They have a different experience. They don't have to give up, making money. That's not the point. The point is to do life differently, that's more meaningful and fulfilling and brings you joy and excitement and enthusiasm and inspiration, and also then allows you to be who you're meant to be, doing what you're meant to do and making greater contributions. So in fact, it amplifies your effectiveness as a human, as an executive, an entrepreneur, by relaxing. Like you just never imagine.
I know, it's so funny, everyone, because it's the most kind of ordinary little words, and you say relax and everyone says, oh, I know how to relax, I know how to go on holiday, I know how to have a glass of wine or whatever. Yeah. And I've really tried to give it some fancy name, and it seems like just such a travesty to do that, because it's actually relaxing. And I still find to this day that it is the core skill of skills. It doesn't matter what's going on in your world. If you can relax within it, even in the middle of a disaster, you will be more effective than if you can't. It's as simple as that.
In a specific example, that it's a useful metaphor. I used to have all kinds of body pain, and I would have to have a massage, regularly, because my muscles and joints ached so badly. And when I really evaluate that, it's just the constriction that exists in our body when we're stressed and when we're have repression and all the things that we hold. And learning to relax then allows all of us, our entire body, all our lymph and our blood flow and synovial fluid, and everything starts moving. My body just all of a sudden, like, I don't hurt anywhere. Not only did all the other things change, but I'm by age I am, and I'm not in pain. I'm really healthy. And it affected so many areas of my life in such productive ways. And when you think about just that, in addition to, so think about that related to money flow. So when we allow our entire existence to flow and not be constricted, just imagine what can happen related to our abundance when we trust in being and doing and acting from this place, as opposed to a more restricted, effortful place. Literally, because I'm trusting that it's all going to happen as it should.
Yes, this plays into so many of the things that are happening in the world at the moment. We could almost start a new conversation now around engagement, the huge disengagement from work and all of these things that we're seeing. I'm not going to start that conversation. It's almost like I'm seeing this picture opening up in front of me of the power of the things that we're talking about here, that are very, very simple things. We're talking about trust and relaxation and value and just like really ordinary things that we could talk about any day, but we haven't, I think, recognized what they really are. And I find that beautiful, that such simple things that we all fundamentally know how to do, but perhaps need some encouragement with. But they're not things that are completely alien to us. Such simple things can have such a huge impact. That's actually a very encouraging thing for the future of humanity.
It's with slightly different definitions than they've been given in traditional culture, but I agree, simple notions of how to be humans.
Yeah, how to be humans.
How to be human.
Well, there we are. I think that's a good place. We could end with being humans, at least, instead of the rather freaky aliens we sometimes practice being. And all those weird other forms that we take on through our mental structures or whatever. Yeah, thank you very much, Holly. I actually personally, I just find it really enjoyable to explore this kind of thing.
It's a beautiful conversation. Thank you for inviting me.